mining doesn't employ very many people. It's about 2% of the workforce. Fossil fuel mining is only a small proportion of that. So because mining doesn't employ very many people, it doesn't have a strong electoral base. So what it has to do is it has to convince other Australians who are not involved in mining, who've got no direct stake, that a strong mining industry is in the national interest. So it has to try to work out ways of aligning its interests with other people's interests. Now, what I argue in the quarterly essay is the first time it did this really successfully was in the 1980s, when it derailed the Labor's uniform land rights legislation. That legislation included a veto over mining. It would have given Indigenous owners much more clout in relationship to mining companies than they subsequently got, as it would have prevented things like what's happened when Rio Tinto blew up the cave in the Pilbara. The mining industry was alarmed by this. The legislation that was framed by, first it was framed by Whitlam coming out of the report of Justice Woodward, and then implemented by Fraser. It was bipartisan created legislation for the Northern Territory, did include quite powerful controls that Indigenous landowners were going to have in relation to mining companies. And Labor was proposing to take that and make that uniform land rights, like that is across the country, and have it as federal legislation, which would then override state legislation. The mining lobby got really well organised, and the core of its argument was Indigenous owners shouldn't have rights that non-Indigenous owners don't have. Because one of the things we have to realise, we need to know to see how this worked, is that in Australia, freehold title doesn't give you any control over you don't own the minerals under your soil. They're owned by the state, and the state can sell licenses to explore for those minerals and also to mine for them to outside providers, and you've got very limited capacity to stop that. So Indigenous landowners were going to be given a stronger right in relationship to mining than other landowners. So they were able to start running this, land rights should be the same for all, no special rights. Indigenous people shouldn't have more than the rest of us. And that's exactly, the sort of logic that brought Pauline Hanson to power.